Spot on. Thank you.
All good.
So good evening, everyone. You're very welcome along. As Jack says, there's still people coming in there. We'll let Jack look after that there, and recording is on perfect. Good evening, everyone. You're very welcome along to this evening's session on essential communication skills for club officers. As Jack says, hope you and yours are doing well in these challenging times. But it's nice to be able to escape from it all in the evenings with some, GA-focused webinars as well, which is always nice. As Jack said, I'm Owen Toohey. I'm the National Officer Development Coordinator and a Limerick man originally. Delighted to say we're joined this evening, I believe, from people from across the continent, France. We have people from Scotland and Prague as well, and some Canada representatives as well, which is great to see. I'm also delighted to welcome, Jack said, representatives from the LGFA and Camogie associations as well. This is kind of the second year that we've had all the sister associations under the one umbrella of the Club Leadership Development Programme, so we're delighted to welcome them on board. So look, this evening I suppose that the crux of the matter is to look at just how important communications are in the running of a GA club, and to touch on various aspects of that. The focus of this presentation, obviously normally in a face-to-face workshop we'd be able to have plenty of interaction and bounce ideas off each other. While we can't do that to the same extent tonight, I still think we can have a very valuable session, and as Jack says, I would hugely encourage everyone. There'll be 3 or 4 stops throughout when we'll be looking for contributions from people, so please do use the chat box just in the top right hand corner of your screen, and input your message or your contribution there at any point, and we'll stop, as I say, at various junctures to examine the contributions into the chat box there as well. So yeah, as Jack said, look, this is being recorded, and we'll have a follow-up email tomorrow with the recording and with the slide deck as well as any other resources as well. So look, it's a kind of a general enough webinar. It's open to all officers, and hopefully, everyone will have benefit from it as we go through. So just to touch briefly on the areas we'll address this evening, we'll touch on the importance of communicating within a club and how it's integral to everything you do. One of the lines that will emerge from this presentation, I think, really is that no matter what we do in everyday life, we can't not communicate when we're liaising with other people, and just the importance of that and highlighting the key aspects of that. I suppose to learn from ourselves and the way we might communicate, we'll have to look at the good and the bad examples of that. And as I say, we're joined by people with vast experience on the call this evening, and the purpose of these webinars is, as well as to impart information, is to receive it as well and to learn from each other. So I suppose combinations and concrete examples in everyday life in a GA club of good and bad examples of communications to help us all learn. I suppose being a club officer in this day and age, you're part of a kind of a complex web of communications. I think we can all agree that our roles, while they might be simple on paper, and when you look down in terms of what you're specifically responsible for, it's nice and coherent, but in reality it's very different. And in terms of communication, you're dealing with a wide variety of characters and in different contexts, and that has to shape your style as well. So we'll touch on that for sure as well. The 2 sides of communication, we'll touch on that kind of obviously speaking and interacting with people, to the non-verbal side of things as well, and the listening aspect as well, which is often an underlooked part of communication. So I suppose the purpose as well of this, what we're looking to do, is to give simple tips and simple different tactics and things that you can try to keep aware when you're interacting with people within the club, to communicate effectively, and so to perform your role more effectively and get more enjoyment from your volunteering role as well. So yeah, we'll be looking at the different ways of communicating and the importance, I suppose, of using different methods when in different contexts, of course, as well. So as I say, yeah, your role in particular, and the varied aspects of communication and the various people that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, and your style as well. So in the email you would have got yesterday, I would have sent out 2 additional bits of pre-reading material, one of which was a questionnaire, which you're free to fill out in your own time. If you've done that before this evening, then great. But we'll go through that together in a little while. And the other one then was a case study of, a kind of a typical scenario you might get in the running of a GA club, and how you might, as an officer, as a person with influence in the club, might react to that. might deal with that particular instance. And then finally, I suppose, it's not a conflict resolution module. That's not the purpose of this evening, but certainly, we'll all encounter situations where there might be a bit of tension or there might be some conflict resolution needed, and how the importance of communication within those scenarios, and the things that we can do to, get a positive resolution for everyone involved. So, getting straight into it there straight away. I think Jack is just looking at just muting the mics there again, guys, because even just one mic going off can cause serious disruption in the background. So if we can keep them muted, but by all means, use the raise your hand feature on the top of the screen as well to come in, orally at any point if you wish. So look, I suppose in the modern day, there's literally hundreds of methods of communication. In a GA club, there's types, methods, means. We've just kind of jotted down 10 here to get the ball rolling, but I mean, you could go on forever here. It's very easy to connect with social media. It's important to note, I suppose, that the purpose of this session isn't to kind of go through means of communication, how we do that. We all know that at this stage in the modern world, and in the GA world, we've got so many platforms that we can connect on. But it's important to note that these are tools that we use in communication. They're only part of the bigger picture. And they will be covered in detail, in particular for those PROs among us, who of course will be well versed in this. And similarly with email, with the GA, LGFA, Camogie official emails that we use as officers, obviously a vital direct method of communication with the club, but not the focus of this evening. Use of Microsoft Outlook and so on are covered in other 365 modules. So I suppose, look, the module, it takes a practical look at the nature of communication in the club, and the importance for you as individuals to develop your style when working within different contexts and with different groups, to fulfill your role and to be the best version of yourself in your volunteer capacity that you can be. And these are things that really determine how successful you ultimately are in the role. Just as a precursor to everything, unfortunately, these days, we have to say that some of the material in here, is centered around pre-COVID times. I mean, obviously, face-to-face communication with people is unrivaled and will always remain so. But please God, we'll be able to get back to that before too long. But just to note that obviously all guidelines take precedence at the moment whenever we do get back. But yeah, look, obviously, given the large attendance tonight and given the fact that you each took the initiative to sign up to this session yourself, it's clear that you're aware of the importance of communication and the role it plays within your role within the club and with the club as a whole, which is, the first step, and that's kind of the key learning outcome for this evening, I suppose. So as I said earlier on, in your guise as a volunteer and as a club officer, you're at the hub of a very large and complex web of communication is probably the best way to put it, coherently. And how you communicate with all these different people determines how successful you'll be as a club officer. And it obviously it's so simple because it's intertwined in everything we do. Even in COVID times, you could argue it's become more important because we don't have that face-to-face aspect of it, and it's difficult to reach out to people and to get in touch with people. But it's a key aspect of leadership. It's at the centre of everything we do. So at this point early on, I would just, I suppose, to illustrate the extent and the reach that we as club officers have in terms of communication within the club, I'd like to take the opportunity to get people's views just in the chat box, please, on who you communicated with. So let's say we'll go back maybe, when club season was at its height, kind of in the summer, and who you would communicate with on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly basis, club officers, just to get a sense of the broad range. So I'm talking, players or officers, county board officials, whoever it is. So feel free to start inputting those into the chat box. So just you at the middle, and who do you communicate with on a weekly or daily basis, just to get an idea, and we'll explore some of the feedback coming from that. It's easy to forget, really, how many people you're talking to and the influence that you have. It's only when you take a step back and look at it that you realise the influence you may have. So I see loads coming in now. That's great, guys. Thanks very much. Not already we can see a massive variety in the answers. Juvenile committee, absolutely. Members, coaches, referees, pitch managers, the media, an excellent one, yeah. County COVID officer, absolutely. Unfortunately, a key member of the communication team these days. Parents as well, excellent. County board, yeah. Community at large is an excellent one there as well, for sure, yeah. Club members are in transfers as well, yeah. Regrades, absolutely huge, yeah. Some great contributions there, lads. Thanks very much. I suppose the purpose of that really, as an initial kind of exercise to get people involved, is just to identify the extent and the variety. I suppose is key as well. The scope that which you have, it's at the heart of everything we do is the point really. You could argue that communications is the key task of the club officer, and given the voluntary role and given the influence that you impart upon everyone you come into contact with. Games development manager came in there as well, yeah. Non-club members and sponsors, all key. I mean, it's absolutely huge. Thanks very much, guys, for those contributions. Disciplinary boards. I mean, you could go on, like it's frightening really when you step back and think about it in terms of the extent. It's a complex web of communication. It's exactly what it is really, Right, so we'll move on to the next task here, guys, as well, in terms of communicators. And I suppose we're being very broad here in terms of putting them under two headings of effective and ineffective communicators. And I suppose this is just to bear in mind, some of the aspects the characteristics, the traits that effective communicators embody, as opposed to ineffective. And you could argue that, obviously some of the things that effective communicators do, the ineffective do the opposite or don't do them. But if we could start with, I think we're stuck there now, so if we could start and move on to a different topic now in the chat box. And if we could get contributions, please, and we'll look back at them together then and look at the most important ones of, I suppose, the characteristics or the actions of a good communicator, of an effective communicator, first of all. If we could get some contributions for that, and then we can look at them together and pick out the key ones. Clear and concise, absolutely, yeah. Good listener. Regular is a good one, absolutely, yeah. Regular communication is vital, in particular these days. Look in the eye, excellent, yeah. Approachable, very, very good. Empathy, vitally important. An excellent one there, assuming nobody knows anything about what's going on. Yeah, something that you can fall into the trap of within Gaelic game circles quite a bit, I think, is the kind of, we often hear about the cliques and the feeling that, outsiders mightn't be welcome. So explaining the basics to new people is vital. Assertive, yeah, very good. Known within the club for sure. Availability, yeah, and regular communications, absolutely. Well prepared. Great contributions here, lads. Thanks very much. I suppose when we look at it, we kind of tie it down to two key points. I mean, every one of those, non-verbals in particular, very well pointed out there. I guess some people have touched on it already. The two things, the two traits of an effective communicator in a GA context would be keeping things simple. I suppose having a message or a point to your conversation, and that was touched on really, I suppose, by the comment there that was, to assume necessarily that the person doesn't have a clue what you're talking about, and being very, very clear and concise in your methods, keeping everyone in the loop in particular as well, yeah. And then it was also mentioned as well as listening really is the other one as well. Effective communicators rarely interrupt others in the course of the interaction. And kind of if you must say something, you kind of take a mental note. It's look, it's human nature, I suppose, to kind of get to want to get your point across. But the listening aspect, and we'll get into that into a bit more detail later on, is absolutely key. Yeah, we've got some great ones here. Calm under pressure is a good one. Honesty as well. So fantastic. We touched on both of those. And if we could just restart now again, and if we could avoid, if possible, doing the opposite ones, but if ineffective communicators, then if we could get some examples of that, That would be great now, please, as well. First one in, defensive and long-winded, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Own agenda, aggressive, vague, interrupting, yeah. Waffle, absolutely, absolutely. I think we can all be guilty of it from time to time, but in particular, we've all been at meetings where the key message wasn't clear and it kind of went on for no reason. Bullying for sure, lack of enthusiasm, interrupting, close-minded, no clear direction, not approachable for sure. Confusing and contradicting message, absolutely. Indecisive in a particular, yeah, in a position of influence, as I say, as an officer, that needs to be avoided if at all possible. Yeah, there's some great ones in there, lads, as well. Thanks very much. I suppose to boil it down to the two kind of key ones, someone mentioned earlier on is kind of not being aware of body language in particular, and we'll touch on that in terms of non-verbal communication later on. But some, rolling of the eyes, not making eye contact, raising of the eyebrows, and so on, really sends a clear message that you're not listening or taking on board or valuing the other person. And it can be done literally without realizing. So it's just something that we kind of need to be aware of in our interactions. And then the opposite, the other one, is not being aware of the message. What do you want to achieve from the interaction? And sharing ideas, being open, sharing thoughts with other people, and getting other people's views. In particular, we've been in meetings where some people are potentially a bit more quiet or not forthcoming, and getting them included and being clear about what you want to gain from it is very important. So look, I suppose the key message from that: none of us are kind of born good communicators. We're learning all the time, and there's plenty of resources available. So I'd encourage people to look into those and kind of keep those effective and ineffective traits in mind as we move forward. Thanks very much for your contributions there, lads. We'll just move on to the two sides of communication now. I suppose firstly, look, obviously talking and speaking to people directly is the obvious one, and then responding. The one that mightn't spring to mind immediately is the non-verbal. The body language, the facial expressions, the clothing, even when we're wearing kind of club gear and stuff, that we're all on the same page and we're all pulling together. But yeah, words, pictures, graphics, they're all visual and talking and responding ones. But yeah, look, the non-verbal, it conveys very important messages that we may not even be aware of, and I suppose not just meanings but feelings as well, and tapping into people's emotions. And we're all kind of aware of it, but we can be better at potentially reading it from other people than being aware of our own. So it's just something to very much be aware of. And then listening, absolutely. We tend to forget that it's a vital part of communication, and most people just want to be heard and get their point across. And combined, then they create a good communication chain. And as said at the start, we can't not communicate, for want of a better expression. So when we're interacting with people, we're communicating whether we want to or not, and it's up to us to kind of be aware of our own behaviour to communicate more effectively and thus perform our roles. So just touch first on talking and responding, obviously, the most obvious way of communicating with other people. And we've touched on a lot of these already from your contributions in the chat box. Be clear, keep it simple in terms of your message and the points you want to get across. And that's not trying to say that, in every conversation we're trying to gain something from the other person, but thus that we're not confusing people and we're being clear in our messaging. And that we're not wasting people's time either. Accurate as well, be concise was mentioned as well. Positive, absolutely. Appropriate language, key all the time, really, in terms of just maintaining a level of professionalism, given the role and given who you represent. In particular with underage players, of course. Being honest and tactful, I always find those to be, it's a tight line, but important all the same to be wary of other people's feelings and emotions, obviously, and yet, there's honesty is absolutely key ultimately as well. But there's no need to be condescending, as someone alluded to earlier on as well. Getting a second opinion on the written communication is a good tip. when it's being issued out, just to make sure that the tone is appropriate, and that it won't be taken up the wrong way, and that it's written in a professional manner. So yeah, there are most of them. If anyone has any other examples of good, speaking and responding in terms of oral communication, feel free to drop them in now. But we'll move on to the non-verbals in the meantime as well. So we're going to think before you speak. An excellent one there from Brendan. Yeah, thanks a million. We've got three images here now, examples of non-verbal communication. And I suppose the point of it is to show the power of it that we may not realise necessarily all the time. I mean, it's hard not to kind of shudder at images like these in the times we live in at the moment. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. But look, hopefully we'll be able to get back to that level as well. So look, we'll just show the three images now, and then we'll get some feedback. I suppose what we're looking for here are observations in terms of the non-verbal. What are the characters in these pictures doing that convey the methods of non-verbal communication that they're utilising, and what is the effect of that then? So yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we're talking facial expressions, gestures, eye contact, even posture, tone of voice, all these kind of things. And look, the non-verbal communication, it's an absolutely powerful tool to convey to others what we mean, how we feel about a certain situation, and is a key to building relationships. So we have the first image here. We have our second one here as well. So we're just looking at the body language again and the non-verbal communications and the power of it. So just noting what's kind of going on here. If confusions come on, yeah. I mean, look, there's incredible emotions going on here. In terms of body language, we kind of went from a position where people were kind of immersed in a conversation, and there was signs that there was real active listening going on, and someone felt like they were getting their point across. Physical proximity, obviously, when safe to do so, is a key one as well, and active listening and facial expressions as well. And then we kind of went to obviously emotions of elation and tension, I suppose, from this one in particular. And then to our final one, which is obviously very emotional as well. Yeah, anguish. Got some great ones here. Victory and defeat, heartbreak. Posture, for sure. Yeah. Anguish. Yeah, got some great ones there. So look, I suppose the point is that the power of non-verbal communication can't be stressed enough, and it seems incredibly obvious. It's only when we take a step back and look at our own actions and our response to the actions of others that we kind of get an insight into the power of it and the power of our own actions. So we're continuously, giving and receiving signals when we're interacting with people. We can see, look, the emotion on Alan Brogan's face here, and the gesture that TJ Ryan is making then in the bottom corner, in terms of just pure anguish. So look, I suppose the takeaway message from this section is, if we want to be better communicators, we need to become more sensitive to the body language of other people, but also the non-verbal cues, as well as those of our own as well. The power of them can't really be understated. So the art of listening, it comes back, guys, to our slide on the two sides of communication. So talking, responding, and non-verbal, and then listening as well as a separate. So I suppose everyone, you're aware of the value of this, and being in Gaelic Games clubs, everyone wants to have their opinion heard. So it's a fine line. It's managing, I suppose, the line between ensuring everyone gets their fair share of time, and and not letting people going overboard as well in terms of meetings. But in terms of one-on-one communication with individuals, somebody mentioned empathy earlier on. It was a very, very good point, listening with empathy, and understanding where the other person is coming from their perspective in a non-judgmental way is very important, even if you don't necessarily agree with what they're saying, to make them feel like they're heard, because what they're saying is of the utmost importance. So to walk a mile in their shoes, I suppose, really. So yeah, I suppose it's more than hearing, listening on a broader level, and it's powerful as well in its own right. So we'll invite more contributions now in the chat box, please, lads. We'll start with the do's. So if we could list some do's when it comes to listening, and then we'll go through them ourselves. So we have a handout to share on those. But yeah, common do's, I suppose, when it comes to listening on an individual basis. Listen twice as much as you speak. Excellent point. Yeah, eye contact is coming up a lot. Nodding of your head, actually underrated in terms of body language for sure. Yeah, and kind of that you're open to what they're saying. Engage, absolutely. Yeah. Showing interest. Yeah. Because we're talking about listening, in our positions as club officers, which is more than, if we were listening to family members or whatever. We have a responsibility to listen to our members, and to take what they're saying on board and take it serious. Acknowledge, yeah. Have a private space sometimes, yeah, absolutely. One-on-ones are how people feel heard and listened to. Ask questions, show you've been listening, yeah, an excellent one, yeah, for sure. And be present in the situation, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, some great contributions there, lads. We'll have a look at some others in the terms of the resource after this. And we'll move on to the don'ts now, please, if you can, in terms of what exactly you shouldn't be doing if you're trying to actively listen to people and engage with whoever you're communicating with. Yeah, distraction, absolutely. Don't second guess, absolutely. I mean, look, there's times for debate and for challenging, but this is purely on a one-to-one basis, and just let the person be heard initially. Eye contact again, for sure, yeah. Daydreaming, absolutely. Yeah, no making fun of or belittling, or being dismissive. Looking at the phone, absolutely. Can all be guilty of from time to time in this day and age. They're deserving of your undivided attention, and don't be preoccupied. Yeah, someone actually says just don't stand too close, as may come off intimidating. That's an interesting one. It depends on the person, I suppose, and your relationship with them, and obviously reading their body language cues in terms of what they're comfortable with. But absolutely a good point. It's great, lads. We'll just bring up the sheet here now. Stop sharing it for a moment. Don't commit to something outside your remit is an excellent one as well, to be fair, yeah. If they're very angry, have another officer present, yeah, good one as well. So we have some examples up here now. We've heard quite a few of these already, in fairness. I was going through these earlier on, and I actually think I'll make a couple of adjustments on some of the do's. So absolutely concentrate on what the speaker is saying, and allow them to express himself or herself. I'm not convinced about this one, to be honest. This particular resource is particularly outdated. I think it comes from a record in the 90s. I wouldn't agree with allowing the speaker to control the conversation. Certainly to participate and to get their point across and let them have their moment. But I wouldn't necessarily agree with the controlling aspect of it. And nor the next one, truth be told, as I was going through it, in terms of accepting the speaker's opinion as valid. Certainly, accepts that they believe it to be the case and it's their opinion, that's for sure, and value it. That's not necessarily to say that you have to accept it and take it as gospel yourself. Of course you don't. But absolutely pay attention to not only the words, gestures, and behaviour. And I suppose preventing emotions from inhibiting someone contributed there to have a second person present for particularly tense or trite situations, and that's a good point as well. We don't want our emotions to kind of hijack us and cause us to kind of lose focus and to say something we might regret as well. Do not obviously don't be distracted in terms of phone. Don't daydream, interrupt, or finish their sentence, which we can be guilty of as well. Criticize or judge. We're talking about situations here where kind of people are coming to you in conference to have their voices heard and to have their opinion heard on a matter relating to the club. Anticipating what they're going to say next in terms of prejudging. Become angry, defensive, or upset yourself, or ignore the emotional context. So wait 2 seconds now, we'll just get the slides back up. Lovely stuff. Now, so just moving on to section 4, lads, in terms of your role as a club officer and the communication aspect of that in particular, honing in. So look, we can see club officers here, obviously again pre-COVID, some of the photos certainly wouldn't be acceptable now. But look, we've kind of a chairman walking off the pitch. We've an officer here. We've a coaching officer going out and interacting. So this is just kind of an intro onto our next piece here. So we'll look for contributions again here, lads, just before we jump in to some of the other ones. Let's move down here a bit. In terms of your role and communicating, we'll throw out some examples here of what I'm looking for in terms of dealing with other people, some of the activities. So obviously supporting teams, negotiating for deals maybe, providing information. What other roles would you see as being pivotal to the club officer in modern times? We can just shout them in here. There's no real wrong answers here, in fairness. But yeah, look, negotiating, supporting, and providing information are a few examples there to go by. If we could get a few more in there now, that'd be great, and we can populate this then. So yeah, there we go, perfect. Positive promoter, absolutely. So building rapport, absolutely key. Up to date with technology for sure. Representing your club at functions and funerals for sure. Representing the committee on the pitch. Fundraising. Yeah, engaging with the community on happenings with the club, 100%. Voice of the children from the children's office there for sure. Be the face of the club, absolutely, yeah. And mediator, yeah, it's a good one. Ambassador. Yeah, so they're all excellent ones. So look, I suppose the point of this, we'll go into them. We communicate for different purposes at different times. So context does determine the communication style. There's no point in believing otherwise. So absolutely disseminating and giving information is a key part of the role. And that is obviously falls under the umbrella of good communication. Organising events for sure. Negotiating, as we said, for deals for the club in terms of be they financial or otherwise. Supporting the club for sure in terms of fundraising and on the pitch. Motivating, getting people involved and really, I suppose, engaging within your committee and subcommittees to be the best they can be. Praise and recognition, obviously in the right context is key for people. People respond exceptionally well to that. And even just something very, very simple. We're obviously not talking about anything tangible here, but just recognition that someone did a good job is the significance of that can't be overstated. Challenging people, it was put in there as well, I think, in terms of striving to be the best that you can be as a club. Managing conflict as well, and we'll touch on that in terms of the communication in a little while. So I suppose, look, as I say, mediating in conflict situations as well. Promotion was mentioned several times. Club planning and instructing as well. You know, one day you can be negotiating with a contractor to do a job on behalf of the club, and then an hour later you could be at an under 10 blitz, talking to an underage player, or you'll be, dealing with the pitch man the next day. So they're all different roles. They're all important, and that's leadership in your role. In a word, and effective communication makes your life a lot easier in terms of being a leader within your community. So then, in terms of your style, I sent a questionnaire around yesterday. Obviously, we've got we've 170 people online, so we won't be able to go through it as we would like to, unfortunately. But it's just for yourselves. Now, it's important to say as well that it's not, upon completion of this survey, it's not putting you into a box. We probably all fit into all four categories at different times, depending on the context. But it might give a dominant style. Most people have a preferred style, or kind of a combination of styles that they like to communicate with. But obviously, the context determines that as well, inevitably. But as a leader in the club, I suppose it's important to be aware of your dominant communication style, so that you can, take a step back and, as I say, look at things from other perspectives to make sure that you're approaching the situation with an open mind. So if anyone hasn't received that questionnaire, by all means, let me know. But it's a useful exercise to do by yourself. You just fill out I think there's 20 items on a level of 1 to 4, and then you fall into one of 4 categories. Now, as I say, it's far from that black and white in real life, and there's aspects. We all have aspects in each of the categories, but still useful to see in general which one you might fall into. So we'll just have a look here at the summary of the different styles that occur as a result of completing this questionnaire. So openly aggressive, I don't think there's too many of us online tonight who will fall solely into this, to be fair. Certainly, if anyone is involved in Gaelic games, this won't be their main trait, but this is the one to avoid, I suppose, at all costs, really, because it certainly won't get you very far in your role. You're direct in expressing your needs, wants, and opinions, and you give no thoughts to others. I win, you lose. So never to be used, really. And if that is the case, if that's how you're approaching the situation, you need to take a step back. Passive aggressive, then, that you ensure indirectly that everyone knows my needs, wants, and opinions, and understand that they take precedence. So we both lose in that scenario, which isn't much better than openly aggressive, and can happen when people get invested into personal projects, and personalities take a hold, and individuals triumph ahead of the bigger picture. So it's just a dangerous one, and again, just one to avoid. But I suppose the key is to recognize that you or someone else is falling into that trap. So yeah, look, it's one to be avoided as well. In terms of passive, then, as we spoke about earlier on, about people in meetings who might be on the more quiet side or shy side, and as a result don't express their needs, wants, or opinions directly. So they put others' needs ahead of their own, and I think that is one perhaps that we've all been guilty of at times. If there's strong characters in the club or in meetings, or taking over the communication chain, and just big personalities that fill the room and they take it in. So you need to make sure that all voices are heard. And then somebody actually said this earlier on, which I suppose is the way we want to be in terms of approaching as many situations as we can. So you express clearly your needs in the situation, your wants and opinions, but in a way which is considerate to others, which is the ideal way of doing it. And look, obviously not possible for every possible situation. Some people will be let down or peeved at certain situations, but that's the price of leadership, I suppose, really, that you can't please all people at all times. But it's just about finding that middle ground. So each person's communication style, I suppose, is a unique combination of their skills and personality, learned through experience and formal settings as well. So generally speaking, the point of this is that you should be assertive when communicating, but obviously a degree of flexibility is necessary in the role, for sure. So we're nearly there, lads. Communication during conflict. This one was with regard to the case study which was sent as well. So we'll get views on this. So we'll just stop sharing this and we'll bring it up for people who may not have seen it. So views are welcome on this, lads. Not in particular of what they should do, but what they should do in a communications context. Because obviously there'll be differing views on this. This isn't a kind of a black and white matter, but in terms of dealing with the stakeholders, what should the chair and secretary do? So a club and a chairperson and secretary have heard complaints about the under-14 manager. The team won the divisional semi-final by 14 points and now have the final next week. And this match was effectively over at half time. So we're looking at this match, this scenario is happening at this particular game. The manager and his selectors have worked very hard with the team all year, and the training sessions were well organised. He has a reputation as being a hard taskmaster. He says the no-nonsense approach is necessary to prepare players for the reality of what lies ahead. And on the sideline, he can be very loud, sometimes call players by their second names. His sons and the two sons of the two selectors are on the team. The chair and the secretary have heard a number of parents complaining during the game that he's not giving everyone a run, even when they're winning by a large margin, and also that he shouldn't be shouting like that. So in terms of kind of not conflict resolution, but communication during this particular scenario, what would people's views be on what the chair and secretary should do for this particular situation? Chair should approach the coach and have a discussion, absolutely. Validate the authenticity of the complaints for acting is an interesting point and well made, yeah, for sure. We have to look at all sides of the situation. Children's officer may need to be made aware of that situation, absolutely, in this particular way. Yeah, let the manager know about complaints, make sure the underage management team are aware of the club's position, absolutely. Verify that the children are upset about it, yeah, it's a fair point. So you can see that there's a lot of stakeholders in play here. It's far from a black and white situation. You kind of have the parents, you have the children who probably, are potentially in various camps in terms of how they feel about it, and then the coaches, of course, as well. Yeah, inclusivity versus all about winning. Yeah, it's opening that debate for sure. Remind mentors of duty of care to players and duty of care to club, absolutely. Yeah, some great contributions there, Ed. Thanks very much. So I suppose, yeah, look, we've got some great contributions there. The long and the short of it, really, what we would kind of be recommending to do from a best practice point of view, and yeah, it depends if there's an official complaint or not. Actually, that's a good point. If the situation is unfolding in front of them, as club officers, they should, probably wait for the game to end or whatever. Move away from others and onlookers into kind of a more private setting. Absolutely. You yourself as an officer should be aware of your own emotions. Keep them in check, regardless of how you feel about it, and listen initially, as people said, to get the full side of the story. Because there's always two sides. So listen with respect and empathy. And likely, if there is tension or anger, if they feel hurt, the situation will diffuse a bit. It's very tempting to kind of rush in and throw your opinion at it. But by letting the manager or selectors involved, let them have their piece initially is an excellent way to diffuse the situation from the off. As we mentioned earlier on, I suppose being honest but tactful is the key. So yeah, look, you absolutely are caught in the middle. You're the middleman here, really. So you need to represent all sides as best you can and do what's best, I suppose, for the club and the club's ethos as a whole. So you need to be honest with the manager and selectors, but be tactful and be wary of their feelings as well. And I suppose ultimately, that setting, when the game is there, when the wound is raw, isn't the best place for resolving any particular matters. So agree to meet at a later point in time and kind of leave it at that. Then at that point would be what the best way to go about it, I think, to be true. So I suppose, look, the key learning points from that, lads. Some great contributions coming in there. Thanks a million. Poor communication can give rise to conflict, or in this case, has the potential to light a fire and make it a lot worse if not done correctly. So even in that situation, we mentioned, the GAALearning and the Rooney are both involved, and having two people involved, having backup in that situation is vital to reinforce the message, but also, just to make them feel like, it's not one-on-one, that there's not one person kind of that they're being heard. So how you communicate during a conflict is critical. And as I mentioned earlier on, emotional hijacks can occur. The club policy is important here as well, but in terms of emotional hijacks, yourselves, when you're trying your very best to keep it together, but something might tip you over the edge when that affects you personally, and it's very important to try and take a step back if that is the case, rather than doing more damage to the situation or throwing gas on the fire. Thanks very much, lads. There's some great contributions inside there. So we're pretty much there now, lads. Thanks very much for your attention. It's one of the shorter webinars in general as we go, which is no harm either at times to keep it short term. So in terms of take home messages, look, we kind of said you can't not communicate really. You're always communicating whether you realise it or not. That's the key one that often gets overlooked. It's not just speaking or online methods. How you communicate will determine your success. The importance of it can't be exaggerated. So it's worth taking a step back and just seeing how you're dealing with different people, and you're likely dealing with different cohorts in different ways. So you may need to take a step back and see, am I dealing with this particular cohort in the most effective way possible to make my job easier, but also to make them feel heard and to impact the club positively. Different types of communication, all different and all important. Listening, as we've touched on, is absolutely critical. Overlooked too long, and in this day and age in particular, I think in this situation we find ourselves in at the moment, hearing everyone's point of view is vitally important. You may have a dominant style of communication, but may need to be more flexible in using different styles in your role. And it's absolutely not saying to be a pushover in any way. It's just to take each situation on its merits and to apply a different style of communication to that, depending on the people you're dealing with. Good communications can prevent conflicts before they happen, which is obviously what the name of the game, and can help manage difficult situations. So that's pretty much all from me this evening, lads. Hopefully you found something decent from that you can pull out. As I say, the session was recorded, so if there's anything you found there worthwhile, we'll be sharing that with you tomorrow, as well as the slides. Jack will put in the link for the feedback there as well, just to help us keep improving as best we can with these online sessions. If you took 2 minutes to do that, that'd be very much appreciated. And look, if there's anything else at all that I can help with in the interim, if you're looking for recordings or resources, feel free to shoot myself or Jack an email. You would have got those, I'd say, recently enough. And listen, take care. Mind yourselves in these difficult times. And that's pretty much it, Jack. I don't think we've anything else to add, have we?
No, I'm firing that message into the chat box there now. That should be coming through. So the first thing there is just the feedback form that Owen touched on. If you would mind kindly filling that out, it should only take about 2 minutes or so, and it's just crucial for our feedback and how we can improve going forward. So if you wouldn't mind taking 2 minutes to fill that out, please. And the second link there is just the Club Leadership Development Programme calendar. So that's any upcoming webinars that we have that are scheduled, you'll see there. And if there's any interest in registering for those, you can see the details of those upcoming as well. So I think that's all from my end as well. So I think once again, just many thanks to Owen for taking the time out and going through the messages there. I think, the messages to take on there at the end are crucial, and probably they're overlooked a few times as well, I think it's fair to say. So many thanks to Owen for reinforcing them. And also many thanks to yourselves for joining us in this evening. I think it was a very worthwhile session, and definitely everyone will take something from it. So as Owen mentioned, the slides and recording will be sent out in due course. And once again, many thanks to everyone for joining. So take care, everyone, and thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Mind yourselves.
Cheers, folks.